I knew something was off the second I saw the HR director outside my office, tapping nervously at her Fitbit like it was counting down a bomb. Christine, can you come with me for a quick chat? She said, not meeting my eyes. HR never does quick chats, and they damn sure don't schedule them at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday, when the smell of catered sandwiches from the executive floor still lingers in the hallway like a taunt. I followed her down the hall anyway, walking past three analysts who suddenly became fascinated with their spreadsheets. One even unplugged his mouse and plugged it back in, twice, just to avoid looking at me. The conference room had that air-conditioned stillness of corporate execution. There was a folder already on the table. Not a manila one, no. This was navy blue with a silver embossed Delancey Metrics logo, kind they only pull out when someone's being crowned or beheaded. Sitting at the head of the table like some Game of Thrones reject was Damon Nichols, brand new VP of Strategy, fresh off a poach from Norfield Analytics. The kind of man who wore loafers with no socks and thought empathy was a spreadsheet column. I'd seen his type before. Fast talkers, idea stealers, fizz and fizzle boys. He didn't even say hello. Just pushed the folder toward me and grinned. Christine, he said, we're restructuring a few things. As of this afternoon, you'll be moving into a new role, Compliance Advisory Liaison. It's a better fit for your skill set. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, then at the HR rep, who had now busied herself arranging pens like she was staging a crime scene. It's not a debate, Damon added, his smile twitching upward like he was enjoying himself too much. Just sign it. I took the pen. My hand didn't shake. My voice didn't crack. I signed it slowly, carefully, like I was autographing the last chapter of a book only I knew the ending to. He leaned back in his chair like he'd just dunked on someone. Great, HR will get you settled in the new space. I stood up, straightened my blouse, and before walking out, I locked eyes with him and said, you might want to read what you sign next time. Not everything's optional. He blinked, just once, confused. But I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing the rest. I walked out. Back in the main office, you could feel the hush settle like dust on old cubicles. People turned away. One guy coughed, then immediately picked up his phone like he was being paged by God. Karen from payroll pretended to dig something out of the printer tray, even though it was clearly empty. 16 years I'd given this company. I knew where every wire was buried, who actually did what versus who just talked loud in meetings, and which vendors you could bribe with a steak dinner instead of a full PO. I built the logistics systems they still bragged about at industry events. I wrote the risk protocol Damon used as his presentation deck last quarter. Hell, I trained half the directors still pretending I don't exist. And now, I was being shuffled into a role so vague, it might as well have been called Please Quit Quietly. My new office was a windowless cube outside the copy room. The previous occupant had left a dried-out cactus, a broken chair, and a post-it that just said RIP. I sat down, exhaled once. Then I opened my inbox and started sorting. Not just emails, but history. I pulled up old project threads, approvals, contract files, archived folders HR forgot I had access to when they revoked my permissions. I knew what I was looking for. It was just a matter of time. They thought they could erase me with a folder and a smug smile. They forgot who built the damn foundation they're standing on. I packed my desk in 3 boxes. One for personal stuff, photos, my ceramic mug that said ask me about your audit risk, a pen holder shaped like a fire hydrant, which always got a laugh in compliance meetings. The second was for my reference books, binders of SOPs, post-it tab to hell, with notes from 16 years of battles, one in budget meetings and fire drills dodged during client meltdowns. The third box? That one was for the quiet kind of rage. Files I wasn't supposed to keep. Screenshots I wasn't supposed to take. Memos I'd sent that had been ignored until someone else repackaged them as Damon's vision. I rolled my chair back one final time and looked out over the office floor. Same carpet I'd seen every day since 2008. Same plants that were probably plastic. Same damn microwave that gave up halfway through defrosting anything thicker than a lean cuisine. But the energy was different now. It always is after someone gets the knife. A few people offered tight-lipped sorry, Christine looks without saying a word. Others vanished behind coffee cups or suddenly important Slack messages. Silence isn't just absence of noise, it's a corporate language. And today, it was saying we saw what they did to you. And we're not getting next. They didn't even give me a card. I walked those 3 boxes back to the far end of the building, past the mailroom, past the forgotten water cooler that dispensed lukewarm droplets of despair, into what used to be the records annex. A dusty corner now labeled compliance support. No nameplate, just a crooked label on the door and a humming fluorescent light that flickered every third breath like a dying thought. The desk was smaller, older. One leg had been shimmed with cardboard and hope. But the network jack worked, and no one came back here unless something was on fire. That made it perfect. Damon's innovation team had already started hosting town halls, unveiling systems I built as brand new strategic frameworks. One slide showed my escalation protocol, down to the fonts I preferred, labeled as Damon's tiered risk model. Another showed my vendor onboarding system, now apparently streamlined with 2 extra steps and a new logo. It made me want to throw a stapler through the wall, but instead I made tea, sat down, logged in, and started digging. My archive was deep. Over the years, I'd copied myself on just about everything. Half the company didn't understand email threads well enough to notice, and the other half assumed I was just a stickler, which I was. But I was also a builder, and builders keep blueprints. It started with the small stuff: meeting notes, project logs, compliance deviations, and who signed off. Memos about system risks I'd flagged months before Damon even arrived. His name wasn't on a single one. Then I opened the legacy contracts folder. It hadn't been touched in 3 years because most of what was in there had already been absorbed into newer frameworks, mostly mine. But tucked at the bottom was something I hadn't thought about since the Bryant partnership: a master services agreement signed during the merger prep 3 years back. Thick, tedious, but important, and buried in Appendix D in language so boring it could put a coffee addict to sleep, was something that made my heart hitch. Key personnel clauses. I scrolled down. My name was there. Full legal name, job title at the time, timestamped and codified. Read, in the event that Christine H. Linwood is reassigned, demoted, or otherwise removed from duties directly related to system compliance, risk management, or operational integration, without the express written consent of both parties, all pending integrations, partnership extensions, or acquisitions shall be suspended for a minimum review period of 60 business days. I stared at it, not blinking. 3 years ago, it looped me into this clause during the deal with Bryant because the systems I'd built were too brittle to be handed off without oversight. Legal needed assurance. I was that assurance. And no one, not Damon, not HR, not even the damn CEO, had bothered to check. They moved me, without consent, without review, without a single goddamn clue. I sat back, closed the binder, and exhaled through my nose, slowly. The kind of breath you take when you realize the storm isn't coming. You are the storm. The next morning, I arrived early. Like, building still locked, janitor still mopping the marble foyer early. I didn't come in to impress anyone. I came in because I needed solitude, and I needed time. Time to make something clean out of the mess Damon had stirred up like a raccoon with a grudge and an MBA. I brought coffee in a thermos older than some interns here, sat down in my little exile corner, and turned on the ancient desktop that whined like it needed a priest. I pulled out a yellow legal pad because when you're piecing together corporate negligence that might be worth $350 million, you don't rely on Word docs and wishful thinking. You need ink. You need paper. You need a paper trail that no one can accidentally archive. Step 1, reconstruct the chain of events, not how I remember it, but how it happened, digitally, provably, time-stamped. I pulled up Outlook and went back 12 months, then 18, then all the way to the earliest whispers of the acquisition. I remembered the first hint, an internal calendar invite from the COO titled Operations Framework Resiliency, internal eyes only. At the time, it sounded like jargon stew. Now it smelled like smoke from a fire someone tried to hide behind PowerPoint. I printed everything, threads between legal and compliance. Notes from meetings where I was CC'd, and more importantly, ones where I wasn't but had access to the calendar metadata. There was a pattern forming. As the acquisition picked up steam, Damon's name started appearing more. Mine started vanishing. It didn't matter. I had receipts. I had version histories. And most important, I had the one contract no one had dug back into. The original MSA with the acquiring firm wasn't stored digitally. That's what saved me. Our legal department, God bless their 2002 document system, had only scanned it in. I found it in our shared drive under Partnership's Legacy, right arrow Bryant integration, right arrow initial MSA executed. It was untouched. No red lines, no amendments, just a 67-page stone tablet of legal doctrine. I skimmed the first 10 pages. Definitions, scope, indemnity, blah, blah, blah. My pulse started ticking a little faster. Page 28, personnel clauses, there it was. Appendix D, section 4.7, I slowed down. In connection with the continuity of systems compliance and operational integrity, Delancey Metrics designates the following individual as key personnel, then my name. Not just Christine. Full name, title, ID number, date of designation. It even specified my original job function, compliance systems architect, and named the precise categories of authority that could not be reassigned without mutual written approval. And then, the line that mattered most. Any reallocation, demotion, reassignment, or exclusion of the above individual from primary duties during the integration or acquisition period, defined as starting from date of MSA signature through final closing, without prior approval from both parties' designated signatories, shall result in the immediate suspension of escrow operations for a minimum of 60 business days. That was legal oxygen. I read it 3 times. My fingers started tingling, not from caffeine, but from something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power. The kind they don't advertise on LinkedIn or mention in company town halls. Quiet power. The kind you only get when you've been around long enough to see how people forget the foundations they're standing on. I printed the MSA, highlighted everything, tabbed the page, wrote a brief summary in red pen across the cover. Role change triggers clause. Notified? No one had asked me. No one had thought to, because they assumed I was a quiet compliance woman with a mug and a dusty cubicle, not the walking, talking circuit breaker to their whole multi-million-dollar transaction. I leaned back in my chair, a smile just barely twitching at the corner of my mouth. I thought they'd sideline me. Turns out they'd just pulled the pin and handed me the grenade. I waited until lunch, when the building emptied out, and the scent of microwave sadness and lean cuisines wafted down the hall like a warning shot, before making the call. Jill answered on the second ring. Christ, tell me you're not calling from the dungeon, she said, voice raspy from too much courtroom coffee and too many late nights cleaning up other people's messes. Jill had been with Delancey's legal team for a decade, long enough to know where the real landmines were buried, and more importantly, which ones were still live. I need a sanity check, I said, keeping my voice low. Remember that MSA with Bryant? 3 years back, there was a pause on her end. I heard her swivel in her chair, probably closing her office door. Yeah, I remember. That thing had more clauses than a divorce attorney's Christmas card. I found something in Appendix D. Key person clause, it names me. Wait, you? She said, instantly sharper. That's not normal. That clause was added late in the game. You sure it wasn't just advisory? Christine H. Linwood, Compliance Systems Architect. Job functions and scope clearly defined. Says any change in role requires dual-party written approval or it freezes escrow for 60 business days. Another pause. She exhaled slow. If they changed your role without dual-party approval. Christine, it's enforceable. That was all I needed to hear. I thanked her, hung up. Then I spent the next 4 hours doing what Damon's crew thought I forgot how to do, preparing a case that didn't need volume, just precision. I started building the binder, not a metaphorical one. A real, spine-snapping, tabbed-out, zero-fat binder with laminated index dividers and sticky tabs color-coded like I was preparing to argue in front of the Supreme Court. Which, in corporate America, might as well be the boardroom with a whiteboard and a CFO who's losing sleep over escrow terms. No drama, no threats, just facts. Tab 1, original MSA with my name highlighted and a printout of the timestamp PDF properties showing it hadn't been altered. Tab 2, my original job description. Tab 3, role reassignment paperwork, Damon's little sign it, it's not a debate special. Tab 4, timeline reconstruction. Emails and calendar invites showing a clear shift in authority without mutual sign-off. Tab 5, a simple memo summarizing the sequence of events with cross-reference page numbers and digital audit trails. I kept it clean. No snark, no shade. Just the cold kind of clarity that gets lawyers blinking faster and executives calling urgent meetings with no agenda line. That night, Damon held court in the main conference room during one of his god-awful innovation town halls, complete with a ring light and printed handouts. I sat in the back, binder closed on my lap, listening as he smirked his way through slides titled New Era of Compliance Accountability. He was saying things like, we finally have oversight in place, and legacy systems were, well, a bit dusty, let's be honest, while 3 rows ahead of me. The junior analyst nodded so hard her ponytail bobbed like a metronome. The projector flashed a diagram I'd built 5 years ago. They'd slapped a new header on it, but it still had the same error margin footnote I'd flagged in 2019. I could almost laugh. Damon ended the session with a quote he clearly thought sounded profound. True leadership is cleaning up messes you didn't cause but were smart enough to spot. People clapped. I didn't. I just tucked one final document into the binder. It was a short email chain, internal comms between Damon and HR, scheduling my reassignment without notifying legal or the acquiring firm. The subject line read, Christine realignment just needs signature. The body, no need to loop in Bryant, this is internal only. That was the nail. Binder zipped, T-sipped, smile sealed. They were so busy branding a new era, they forgot what built the last one. And what would burn the next? The glitch didn't announce itself with alarms or red lights. It came in as a mild-mannered spreadsheet attachment from a due diligence portal. Subject line, buyer checklist preliminary packet A, just one of 1,000 steps in the M and a dance. Harmless looking, boring even. But to the trained eye, mine, it read like a minefield with a smiley face sticker on top. I wasn't even supposed to see it. The checklist had been routed to Damon that morning. His name was right there in the recipient field, along with a few other VPs, none of whom had ever read a contract cover unless it had the word bonus in it. Damon, in all his radiant brilliance, had forwarded it to Lane, an overworked intern with a communications degree and a profile that still said aspiring brand strategist. No one in legal was looped. Compliance wasn't even CC'd. Hell, finance was marked optional. Lane did his best. I'll give him that. He checked every box like a kid filling out a college housing form. Do you confirm continuity of key operational staff? Check. Have there been any material role changes in the last 90 days? Nope. Can you verify that all contractual obligations involving key personnel have been upheld in full? Affirmative. Poor kid. He even included a thank you note at the bottom. Please let us know if you need anything else. What Lane didn't realize is that M and a teams don't need notes. They need accuracy. The minute I saw it hit the shared inbox, which I still had access to, buried under the old risk and integration rules, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I smiled. I didn't interfere. Didn't stomp into Damon's office or yell fire in the Slack channel. That's not how you play it when the stakes are $350 million and climbing. I simply clicked forward, added my own Delancey email as a CC, just enough to log the trail and left it alone. Then, at precisely 3:08 p.m., I pulled the binder from my desk drawer. Tab 3, Role Reassignment Form. Tab 4, Emails Proving No Dual-Party Approval. Tab 1, the MSA. Appendix D, Item 17. The page still had the original legal watermark. It wasn't just contract language, it was a loaded gun sitting in plain view. I composed the email slowly, like setting a snare. To legal at Bryant Holding Group Com CC, none subject, MSA Appendix D body. You may want to review Appendix D, Item 17. No salutation, no signature, no background, just a single sentence with the weight of 16 years and $1 billion handshake behind it. Then I hit send and leaned back. I wasn't hoping anymore, that phase was over. Hope is for people waiting on apologies. I was working with leverage now. Leverage doesn't plead. It doesn't ask for fairness. It just waits for gravity to do its job. An hour later, the buyer's paralegal requested a follow-up call with our legal team. By 5 p.m., the calendar invite went out for a joint clarification session, scheduled for 9:30 the next morning. High priority, executives only. The invite didn't include Damon, but I was on it. He hadn't noticed yet. He was still strutting through the main floor, joking with directors about how due diligence is just corporate foreplay. I watched him from the glass-walled copy room, humming to himself as if he'd already ordered the champagne. Funny thing about arrogance. Makes you loud, but consequences? They come in whispers. It started with silence. Not the polite kind, but the kind that drapes over everything like a blackout curtain. No email pings, no shared folders lighting up with new revisions, no follow-up calls from the buyer's team who, up until that morning, had been breathing down our necks like closers on a sales floor. Then the memo hit. A plain PDF titled Clarification Request. Key Personnel Provisions. Delancey Metrics MSA Review. Sent directly from the buyer's general counsel to our board liaison and CEO. No niceties, no warm greetings, just 6 bullet points and a request for immediate confirmation on whether the key person clause naming me had been triggered without approval. You could feel the shift in the air like a change in barometric pressure. Phones got quieter. Doors that normally stayed open now clicked shut. People walked faster. Faces buried in Slack messages they suddenly didn't want visible over their shoulders. Damon, for the first time since arriving, stopped strutting. He stormed out of his office mid-morning, jaw tight, hair slightly undone, still trying to act composed, but every step gave him away. He started showing up in doorways asking who's been talking to legal, and why is compliance suddenly in the loop again? He even poked his head into the risk team bullpen and said with a weak chuckle, "Somebody must have hit reply all too hard, huh?" Nobody laughed. Nobody answered. And then came the cherry on top. I wasn't invited to the strategy meeting. Not that they said that out loud. I just never got the calendar invite. It was a quick sync with the executive team on narrative continuity and buyer positioning. I found out because someone accidentally printed the agenda to the wrong hallway printer, mine. They were trying to box me out again, which was adorable. While they rehearsed damage control, I used the free time the way I always do, constructively. I opened a blank doc and started writing out a timeline, not just dates and actions. No, this wasn't a diary. This was an evidentiary blueprint. I listed every step Damon had taken, from the day he signed my reassignment form to the moment that intern fired off a faulty checklist. Every email, every calendar invite, every conversation I could reference. When I couldn't prove something directly, I connected it to something I could. Every time my name disappeared from a compliance thread, I marked it. Every time one of my systems was rebranded under Damon's efficiency initiatives, I cross-referenced it with a timestamp and source code version number. Then I printed the whole thing, 12 pages, clean, indexed, no flair. Just the quiet kind of weapon that hits hardest when delivered without warning. Around 2 p.m., my cell buzzed, not the desk phone, not a Slack ping, my cell. That number only a few internal people had, mostly legal. The contact name flashed. Jill. I picked up. Hey, her voice was taut, like a violin string about to snap. Quick one, Christine. We received your summary. The GC has eyes on it now. Is everything in here accurate? I didn't hesitate. Every page has a receipt. Another pause, longer this time. Christine, she said, her voice lower. This might go nuclear. I looked out the tiny window in the copy room across from my desk, the only sunlight I'd seen in weeks. Outside, the sky was turning the same overcast gray that always creeps in before a spring thunderstorm. Then someone should have checked the weather report, I said. They're the ones who took off the roof. She chuckled once, humorless. I'll be in touch. I hung up. Across the office, Damon emerged from the conference room, red-faced, his suit jacket slung over one shoulder like it had betrayed him. He glanced around, saw me at my desk, and paused just long enough to register that I was still here. Still calm, still sipping that same mug that read compliance isn't optional. He didn't say anything, and I didn't look away. He finally understood this wasn't a conversation, it was a countdown. They booked conference room A, the conference room, the one with the heavy walnut table, the massive TV no one knew how to operate properly, and the scent of forced optimism baked into the carpet. Emergency meetings were rare. Emergency meetings with the board were rarer. Emergency meetings with the board and the buyer's legal team, that was DEFCON 1 forget your buzzwords and start praying rare. It was just after 7 o'clock a.m. when the invites went out. Meeting start time, 8 o'clock sharp. Subject line, escrow integrity review. Joint counsel presence confirmed. That phrase alone probably shaved 5 years off the CEO's life. When I arrived at 7:55, the hallway was already thick with the sound of low murmurs and cufflinks being adjusted. Our board members filed in looking like they hadn't slept. One of them, Monica Cho, who usually rolled in with cold brew and a Chanel tote, had a legal pad, no makeup, and eyes like a woman who'd Googled contractual landmine at 2 a.m. and found her own name in the crater. The buyer's team was already seated, polished, unbothered. Their GC, Franklin Miles, had a tablet, a fountain pen, and the expression of a man who'd walked into a casino knowing which dealer was marking the cards. I sat in the back corner of the room, no nameplate, no formal seat at the table, just a chair by the credenza near the auxiliary speakerphone. Like a prop, I didn't care. I wasn't there for performance. The CEO, Harold, stood at the front, voice already tight with rehearsed professionalism. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. There's been some concern from Bryant's legal team about personnel transitions, particularly in compliance, and we're here to address those questions thoroughly. Damon strutted in last, late by 3 minutes, holding a double espresso and not even trying to hide his annoyance. He took the seat directly to Harold's right, adjusted his cuff, and smiled at the buyer's team like they were just early for another one of his vision workshops. He started talking before anyone could stop him. I'll lead on this, he said, already opening his laptop. This is largely a misunderstanding about internal role flexibility during the acquisition process. We've had great success aligning legacy systems under my division, and Franklin Miles held up a hand. Calm. Deadly, Mr. Nichols, he said. We'll get to your input shortly. First, we'd like to establish some facts. Damon blinked, slightly off balance, but nodded. Franklin turned to his tablet. According to our records, the Master Services Agreement signed 3 years ago during the Bryant-Delancey Strategic Partnership contains a key personnel clause. Appendix D, Item 17. The room didn't breathe. He continued. That clause explicitly names Christine H. Linwood, former compliance systems architect, as a designated key person whose role may not be reassigned, altered, or removed without the written approval of both parties. He looked up. Was Miss Linwood's role changed within the last 60 business days? No one answered, so he asked again. Was Miss Linwood reassigned to a non-compliance advisory role without Bryant's written approval? Harold turned to Damon, almost imperceptibly. Damon cleared his throat. Yes, but we didn't realize. Franklin raised a single eyebrow. Who signed the role reassignment? Damon looked genuinely confused now, like someone just flipped to the last page of a mystery novel he thought he'd written. I did. With HR. Thank you, Franklin said, turning back to the board. Then by the language in the MSA, that action constituted a breach of the key personnel clause, and per the terms in Section 4.7, escrow operations are now suspended pending legal review. Miles tapped his tablet, effective immediately. Silence, like gunshot silence. You could see Harold's pupils dilate. Monica Cho dropped her pen. The CFO leaned forward with both hands flat on the table, staring at nothing. Damon opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, no slide deck could save him. One of the Bryant directors, who hadn't spoken all morning, leaned back and muttered, unreal. Miles wasn't done. We're willing to continue the acquisition process, but with renegotiated terms and a compliance revalidation, which, by necessity, will delay closing by no less than 60 days. Then he turned to me. Miss Linwood, he said, smooth as glass. Would you be willing to confirm for the record that you were reassigned on or about 3 weeks ago without communication from our team? I nodded. Correct. I have the email trail if needed. Harold exhaled like he'd been holding his lungs hostage. Miles just smiled. I thought so. Damon looked like he was trying to find the floor, but there was no trapdoor, just a table full of executives realizing they'd bet everything on the wrong man, and left the woman holding the foundation out in the cold. The binder made a sound when it hit the table, not loud, not dramatic. Just that dull, heavy thud of something real interrupting the make-believe performance happening in the boardroom. Franklin Miles, still calm, still composed, opened it like a priest opening scripture, no flair, no apology. Appendix D, he said, adjusting his glasses. Item 17. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. It was the kind of quiet that made everyone lean forward without realizing it. He began to read. Any unilateral role reassignment, demotion, or reallocation of designated key persons by Delancey metrics, during any period in which escrow is active or acquisition terms are under negotiation, without written mutual consent from both Delancey Metrics and Bryant Holding Group, shall result in immediate suspension of escrow operations, pending full review and reapproval by both parties. He paused, then looked down the table, calm as a surgeon. This clause was reviewed, accepted, and finalized by both sides. It has not been amended or overridden. It is still legally binding. Then he turned the page, just one, and there it was, the name. Christine H. Linwood, he read, underlining it slowly with the edge of a silver pen. Title, Compliance Systems Architect. Scope, System Continuity, Operational Risk Integration, and Regulatory Communication. He circled it, once, deliberate, like a bullet point. Then he looked up. She reassigned without our written approval? All eyes turned to Damon. His face had gone pale, as if someone had drained all the color out with a syringe. He fumbled with the papers in front of him that he clearly hadn't read. Then his voice cracked just slightly. We didn't know she was in the clause. You could have heard a pin drop. Franklin didn't blink, but you signed the reassignment form. Yes, Damon admitted, quieter now. But I didn't realize you didn't check. Franklin said, and the word landed like a gavel. You assumed. Now he slid the binder across the table, placing it gently in front of Delancey's CEO, Harold, whose mouth had thinned into a hard, colorless line. Then the deal is frozen, Franklin said, effective immediately. Harold didn't move. Neither did the CFO. Neither did Monica, who just stared at the document like it was written in ancient runes. No one shouted. No one slammed the table. There was no dramatic walkout. It was worse than that. There was silence, the kind of silence that means something broke and everyone heard it. Across the room, one of the buyer's analysts quietly shut her laptop. Another picked up a phone and started typing, probably updating someone far more senior, someone already calculating how this delay would ripple into Q4 forecasts and investor calls. Damon opened his mouth again, then closed it, then tried again. There must be a way to, but Franklin was already gathering his things. 60-day hold minimum, he said, possibly longer depending on revalidation timelines and legal review. We'll be in touch, then he stood. Before anyone else could, Harold cleared his throat, voice flat and hoarse. We'll follow up with our team, thank you. Franklin gave a polite nod, the kind people give before walking out of a funeral home. I stayed seated. No one spoke to me. No one could. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I didn't say a word. I just reached into my bag, pulled out my thermos, poured myself a half cup of Earl Grey, and took a slow, quiet sip. Damon finally turned and looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since the day he shoved that reassignment folder across the table like it was some kind of checkmate. He looked like a man trying to rewind time in his head, only to find the remote was gone and the batteries had been dead for weeks. No one helped him, not the CEO, not HR, not the board. They were all staring at the wreckage. I was just the one who turned on the light. The boardroom didn't empty after Franklin left. No one moved for a full minute, maybe longer. The only sound was the faint whir of the wall-mounted air vent and the slow tick of the quartz clock that had counted down more than one company's humiliation in that very room. Harold finally broke the spell, rubbing his temples like he was trying to erase the last 20 minutes with sheer will. We need to regroup, he muttered. But the buyer's team hadn't left the building. In fact, Franklin's number 2 had stayed behind, already in quiet conversation with Delancey's general counsel, whispering words like renegotiation, adjusted equity, and clawback consideration. Words that meant money, serious money, money the board had counted on, money they might now lose. Across the table, Monica Cho scribbled a note on her pad, tore it off, and handed it to the CFO. He read it, then got up and left without a word. That's when Harold turned to Damon. I think you should step out for a few minutes. Damon looked stunned, like he hadn't registered that he was now radioactive. Me? Wait, I didn't sign off on the MSA. That was years ago. Legal, Damon, Harold said, still not raising his voice, step out. A few board members finally looked up, eyes heavy and deadpan. No sympathy. Damon stood slowly, collecting his laptop like it was a badge he still believed he'd earned. His mouth opened again as if to deliver one last justification. But none came. He turned and walked out the glass doors without a word. The second he cleared the threshold, HR's director stood up from the back wall. She'd been lurking like wallpaper and followed him. Exactly 5 minutes later, the door opened again. Damon returned, but not to sit. He didn't make it past the door. The HR director handed him a single envelope, then stepped back. He opened it, scanned the contents, and for the first time in his smug, sockless career, his shoulders dropped like someone had physically unplugged him from the wall. No yelling, no protest. He just stood there. The envelope read, "Administrative leave pending investigation." No one acknowledged him. He lingered one beat too long, then turned and walked out again. This time it felt final. The room slowly began to move again, quiet, stunned, reorganizing itself like a ship that had just weathered a sudden storm. Harold cleared his throat again and turned toward me, finally addressing me directly for the first time all morning. "Christine," he began, voice still shaky, "we'd like to formally reinstate you to your original title, with a new salary band and a retention bonus. Generous given, no," I said gently. He blinked. Sorry, I'm not coming back, I said. Calm, no edge, no bitterness. Just done. You didn't lose me today. You lost me 3 weeks ago. This was just the echo. Silence again, but now it felt like acknowledgement. I stood, gathered my binder. No applause, no grand gestures, just a few executives looking down at their hands like schoolchildren called out in front of the class. I walked out of the boardroom with the same quiet stride I'd used walking into HR that first day. No boxes this time. No shame, just clarity. Down the elevator, past the big bronze D mounted in the lobby like a tombstone. The receptionist gave me a polite nod. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. And then, near the sliding glass doors, I saw him. Damon, still in the lobby, still holding the envelope, still trying to process the fact that the game had shifted and he wasn't in the room anymore. He didn't say a word as I passed, just looked at me like he was watching something he couldn't quite name slip out of reach. I walked past him, didn't slow down. Outside, the sunlight hit me square in the face. First time in weeks I'd noticed it. My phone buzzed in my purse. I stopped on the sidewalk and checked it. A text, unknown number. Christine, this is Devin Marks, COO at Bryant. If you're open to it, we'd like to bring you in-house. I stared at the message for a moment, then I smiled. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is leave quietly, while everyone else scrambles to figure out how you held all the keys. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.